My name's Paul Sinclair. I'm presently living in Malta. I am a resilience and emotional intelligence trainer. I specifically work in the areas of trauma and addiction. I've just recently completed a year-long training with Dr. Gabor Mate in regards to his philosophy and coaching techniques called compassionate inquiry, which I found extremely useful with my when working with my clients. I've got rather a checkered history. It's been a long road from the military to the rock and roll lighting industry to 20 plus years of heroin and crack cocaine addiction. Yeah, I run Mind Matters, which is a boutique sort of coaching and consulting company from here in Malta. My wife's a former strategy consultant for McKinsey, so she does all the strategic thinking in regards to our business, and I take care of the emotional side of it. Yeah, on Monday, I start a 9-week resilience training, emotional intelligence training for scientists, 57, I think we have at the moment, from all the major research institutes in and around Europe, like Max Planck Institute, CERN, yeah, the other sort of main ones. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I hope that's helpful, Rob.
Very helpful, very interesting. Lots of content that we could dive into there and just completely get lost in. You said that you take care of the emotional side, which may not be something that, you know, in terms of a pair of people, a lady and a man, the man takes care of the emotional side. And I don't think that's typical, let's say. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I get it completely. Especially in relation to my work with men, our dysfunctional behaviors, our dysfunctional thought patterns, our inability to get in touch with our emotions, our emotional relationships with ourselves, for me, is the root cause of pretty much all of our dysfunctional behavior. And how I know that is because well, if I look back on my addiction, you know, like I said, it was 20 plus years, getting on, I think it was 24 years, full tilt heroin and crack cocaine addiction, that the places where I went for help, psychologists, psychiatrists, other people working in the addiction field, their primary focus was always on the behavior, i.e. the addiction. And I never got anywhere with them. It wasn't actually until I ended up in a rehab in South Africa for a couple of years that that was run and staffed by recovering addicts, even as far as the psychologist. And they weren't interested in the addiction. They weren't interested in what drugs I took. They were interested in why was I in so much pain that I needed to take drugs? And that is emotional pain. So the addiction was basically just a coping mechanism. It's a way of managing my emotions or suppressing them or shutting them down or having some control over my emotional well-being. You know, if I wanted to get high and connected, then I could use coke. If I wanted to suppress and be wrapped in cotton wool, then I would use heroin. So in regard to addiction is quite an extreme form of a coping mechanism, but addiction runs through every one of our lives. Addiction is defined by any behavior: shopping, sex, work, gambling, you name it, any behavior that brings temporary relief from pain or brings temporary pleasure that we can't stop doing despite the negative consequences. And once you scratch below the surface, there's always has an emotional component. People are trying to escape from something. Invariably, it's emotional trauma.
The symptoms that people present, you know, so you're looking at what drives, what pushes that symptom to the surface to be seen. You talked about the emotional pain. When it's so easy to focus on the symptom, isn't it?
That's right. We're not our behaviors. That's one of the things that I tell my clients. And it doesn't just have to be about addiction. It can be anxiety issues. It can be depression, ADHD, all of these mental challenges that we're facing all start off as coping mechanisms, which then become maladaptive because they serve us in the short term when we're very young, when we're trying to deal with emotional problems. But as we get older, we keep them with us. I call it my stupid friend. It was there for me when I was very young, but he's still with me now, and he hasn't learned anything.
I love that.
So he still keeps showing up, and
here he is again.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the place you need to get to. Oh, there he is again.
Couldn't have been more. Well, yeah, that's very similar to what I do. So I think it's important to say to our audience the differences in what we do, but there's similar skill sets, but used in different settings. I think be fair enough.
Right.
So I'm trained to be a coactive life coach, and so what I do is help people go and think and act in aspirational ways, but my coaching is kind of trauma informed, based on 16 months working in GP surgeries and dealing with people, with patients who 75-80% had trauma, and I wasn't the person to go into an investigative route of trauma. In fact, I wish I knew you then, Paul, because you would have been the person I would have sent my patients to when they were ready for something a bit more aggressive. And also what binds us together is that we're focusing on serving men.
What I find is that, especially working with my clients, people come to you and they say, I've lost all meaning in my life. I've lost my sense of purpose. I've lost my sense of, I'm not as good at solving problems as I used to be. My relationships are going down, and they want to focus on specific areas. But actually, when you start scratching beneath the surface, their sleep's in the toilet, they've got emotional issues which are driving these things. So in order for them to actually work on the aspirational side, they first need to take care of the underlying drivers which are really holding them back in that situation.
I've got an image of a waiting room of men, and you and I will appear from different doors. So I think there's some kind of commonality in terms of where we might meet our clients. And we take them on different journeys. We overlap, we both overlap with counselling as well. We both overlap, in therapy, coaching, and mentorship. But there's the dominance of our journeys occur through a different door from that common meeting place. What's your kind of attachment? What's your drive to serve men?
Good question. I think it comes from my own experience. There's definitely an aspect of myself that I can recognize. I can recognize other people's emotional pain, which is another reason why I was an addict, because I am so sensitive. I am very empathetic. I don't think it's men per se. I think it's people in general. For me, it's an intrinsic motivation. It's something that I want to share with people. I want to share with people that there's always the possibility of transformation, no matter how bad it seems.
So if I look back at the history of my coaching, I think it's probably just over 55% women and 45% men. But I advertise, I talk about coaching men. I still coach women, and those clients find me because they see something I'm doing which they like. But going through the experience with the NHS patients, the larger majority, say 60 to 70%, were women. But the men really interested me because I knew they were the tip of the iceberg. And there have been studies to show how infrequently, if ever, men go to the doctor anyway. So I knew they were the ones that were just turning up. And I felt that I wanted to dive into that and find the rest of that iceberg, and help men. Now, I think with coaching, and maybe in your work as well, it helps to have a niche, which is I always say it's like flying a flag on a beach full of people. And on that flag is really, it's kind of my story. And you've talked about your own story. It's something that someone can identify with and go, that resonates with me.
I can relate to that. Yeah.
And that journey resonates. I'd like to go on that kind of journey. And so you have your kind of bullseye client. But then also there are other people that land somewhere else on that kind of dartboard. And I think obviously it's important to have to really click with somebody who you're going to work with, either as a client or a coach or a therapist or a counselor. You've got to click as well. But I just, coming back to the men, the serving men, I just think there seems to be, I had to choose somewhere to make it easier on myself. And I chose somewhere which I had great affinity to. So my dad passed away when I was 17. He was 46. And I think what I see in my clients is that I'm coaching some aspect of my dad, a character that I can think is similar to my dad. And I want to help those people go and live beyond limiting beliefs or learnt behaviors and find freedom and expanse of thought, so that they're free of just being objectively successful and actually successfully internally. Now, you said about coping mechanisms earlier.
Yeah.
That sounded like maybe not going on an eternal journey, but just sort of getting through to the next point.
Yes, coping mechanisms are behaviors that we implement to shield us from something. Let's use an example, say, all right, an example from my childhood. So I suffered with terrible anxiety. So what is anxiety? Anxiety starts out as a coping mechanism. As I was in a very dysfunctional family growing up, what it started off, the coping mechanism started off as me scanning my environment for threats. Hyper awareness of people's body language, non-verbal cues, eye movement, voice tonality, scanning that environment so I would know when to get out, when it was going to get tricky for me. So that's how it starts off, as a coping mechanism. And again, it relates to my stupid friend. In the short term, that's the best thing that I could do. I couldn't run away, I couldn't freeze, and I couldn't fight back. So I learned to scan my environment for threats. So I had forewarning that something bad was going to happen, which then progresses into anxiety. It served me in the short term, but then I had massive levels of anxiety, sort of, not necessarily during the military, but afterwards, when there wasn't so much stuff around to distract me anymore. So that's an example of my own coping mechanism. Another really cool one is ADHD. When you think about ADHD, what is ADHD? It's the inability to be in the present moment. That's what it boils down to. Why would somebody develop the strategy of not wanting to be in the present moment? It goes back to the same stuff. A toxic or not an unsupportive child in the environment. What can the kid do? It can't run away, it can't fight back, and it can't freeze. So what do? They take themselves somewhere else in their mind, which serves them in the short term, but then becomes problematic as they get older, when they get to school, or when they go into the workforce. Or so these are examples of coping mechanisms. Another one is addiction. What is addiction? It's an escape from reality. And why would somebody want to escape from reality? Because it's just too painful to be there, to be in this present moment with their emotions as they are.
I love the idea of your stupid friend, the characterization of something. So I help my clients. I run an anxiety course, loosening the grip of anxiety. So it's about going and doing things despite your anxiety, and taking your stupid friend with you. So we develop characters for each person's anxiety and name them. We have some visuals.
That's interesting. I never heard that.
Yeah, I can show you some brilliant drawings.
Okay. Yeah.
I had one course where we just happened to have some very good artists on the course. I didn't know this. So they had to go and draw their anxiety. The drawings I got back were amazing. And
imagine.
They would have it's called dominant behaviors, when they're triggered. So when do they kind of come to the forefront? And we really wanted to, not to kind of try and suppress anxiety, but to bring it out, to have it be visible, to really know it and actually understand its superpowers. Like, where is it really needed?
Or like I ask my clients, what's the positive intent? What is the positive reason why this behavior is here? What does it do for you? Same with addiction. What does it do for you? It makes me feel more connected. I'm more peaceful. I'm calmer. It gives me energy. It makes it exciting and blah, blah. These are all aspects of ourselves that we possess, but we've lost connection with them somewhere along the way. So the addiction per se it's quite a cool coping mechanism, despite its, the consequences.
And it's telling you lots of things there. All the things you're saying, I'm just thinking they're values, they're things which are important to us. So if by investigating anxiety or addiction, we can understand what is honored by those acts. And then, okay, well, now we know what those are, we can start having a list of how else in our lives can we bring those values, those things which are important to us into our lives in a kind of more conscious way, rather than it just happening in the ball of addiction or anxiety or stress.
It's about developing, because these are all qualities that all of us possess. But somewhere along the way, we lost touch with them, we lost connection with them, because it was too painful for us to remain in contact with them.
I think understanding your own story is really important. So the evolution of something, and we've talked previously and today about maybe triggering events or where something was born. So I coach a lot of people who are hypervigilant. And where did that come from? So going through the evolutionary story, and so if it was trauma, a form of trauma, I mean, to be open, I say that my anxiety that I had, and still have to a degree, but it really arrived in my early 20s, was born out of grief, and grief for the loss of a family unit because of divorce, grief for the loss of my dad. And so I became very insular, and almost like a pair of blinkers being put on. I couldn't see what was over here and over here in my life, or maybe in front. So things surprised me. And the more I became anxious, the more I did this. So the more I just didn't really know about things going on around me. So I became more anxious of things I didn't know and became more insular.
It's like a reinforcing cycle, right? Compounds itself at each and every stage.
Yeah. So I think when you understand where something comes from, it's again bringing up the character of your stupid friend, or the anxiety I talk about is going, and we know where this person originally came from. We know what its purpose was. And so how can we use that in our life today? Where is it useful? Where is it not? Because I think when we have a default behavior, life is, I felt anyway, it was exhausting when I kept applying my anxiety and it wasn't getting me anywhere. I felt like I was wheel spinning, trying hard but not really achieving things. And it's because I had a sort of dominant behavior pattern.
And it's this whole philosophy that we must get rid of something. We must get rid of our pain. We must get rid of our anxiety or our depression or whatever. And actually, you can't get rid of it. All you can do is to develop a relationship with it, understand its positive reason for being there, befriend it, integrate it.
Rather than going treating that thing, whatever that thing might be, is, well, look at the vessel in which it's in. And I think this is the piece of the puzzle that I help men to go and investigate and find, is when they continually try to be objectively successful and they're putting this kind of on hold at various levels. So family, job, love interests, finances, this, that, the other.
It's what we talked about, right? A destination addiction.
Yeah, you mentioned that last time. I'm glad you said that again.
It's when you know, it's especially working with the scientists, they, majority of them are very insecure overachievers. And from a very young age, which was installed for some reason by invariably parents that place huge expectation on them. So, you know, they think, okay, you know, I get through school, I get the best grades, and then I go to university, I get my bachelor's, I get my master's, I get my PhD. When I get my PhD, then everything will be okay.
Oh yeah, yeah. When
I get my, so they get a PhD and they're like, okay, cool, got that. What's next? Okay, so now I need to get a really good job. So they get a really good job. They get that really good job, and it's like, okay, yeah, but I need to get promoted. Okay, so they get this promotion, that promotion, that. Let's take, just for instance, they get to the top of the pyramid, right? So the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, for example, they get there and they're like, okay, so now I'm a CEO. What else do I need? Okay, right, now I need the car that goes with it. I need the wife that goes with it, the house that goes with it, the holidays, the boat, you name it. And they get all of these things, and there's still something missing. They're totally missing the present moment, totally missing the journey. And it's this drive to fill a hole that's within themselves with some external thing, which would just never work. You get a short-term joy of, okay, I'm CEO of a Fortune 500 company. I've got my Lamborghini sat outside on my new boat, or blah, blah, blah. And it's pretty cool for a moment, for a while. But then the goalposts shift yet again, and you need something else to fill that hole. It's
I totally agree.
and I see it all the time. People trying to fill a hole inside themselves with something external, you know, and that all goes back to like motivations. You know, you have intrinsic motivators and extrinsic motivators. Intrinsic motivation is wanting to learn a new skill, want to master a new skill, want to be good at something purely for the joy of that, purely for your own personal growth, because you love what it does for you. It's interesting, it's very cool. Extrinsic motivation, in the sense that extrinsic motivation is basically, when you boil it down, is external reward, avoidance of punishment, or validation. And which is that external need for validation from other people in order to make you feel good about yourself.
It smacks a bit of, when my ducks are in a row, you know, then it all will be okay.
Yeah.
And it sounds then like you're dependent on so many things which are external of you. We're looking so far outside of ourselves for the answer, when if we turn in here.
Exactly.
Now, here's a question. I was talking to someone yesterday about this. What's the barrier to men turning and working on the internal side of things?
Fear
of
what they'll find.
Yeah, so maybe the unknown.
Fear of change, yeah, of who they are in this present moment, this personality construct.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Once you start looking inside, then that is scary, and that takes you into, like, you know, the realms of authenticity and attachment, which shows up in everybody's life on a daily basis. This need to modulate who you are at your core in order to maintain your relationships, to maintain your attachments to other people. And this was a huge one for me, in the sense that if you think about, there's two basic human needs. The first human needs is attachment. So we need to be attached to our parents. Our parents need to be attached to us for us to develop. Once you get beyond the level of reptiles, let's say the mummy and daddy reptile create the baby reptiles, they hatch, the parents are gone, there's no attachment to a parenting figure. When you get to birds, the parents must be attached to the baby must be attached to the bird. You get to mammals, it's even stronger. Then you get to humans, which are the least developed of any animals in the animal kingdom when they're born. So, and their attachment is ongoing until their brains are developed and they are autonomous. So there's this huge attachment need. But then we also have another need, which is for authenticity, to be who we are, to be able to express who we are, to be able to celebrate who we are, to be in touch with our emotions and our gut feelings, and to be able to live our truth. Now, there's a tragic conflict that kicks in here, because many parents are very stressed. They work long hours, blah blah blah. That, you know, and they need their kids to be a certain way. So the child has to trade aspects of their authenticity in order to maintain their relationship with their parents. That's where it starts. And as men, as we get older, we trade aspects of ourselves every single day in order to maintain relationships. And when you start moving to authenticity, this is what I found in what happened in my life, is that important relationships in my life, people couldn't handle it. They couldn't handle me being in touch with my emotions. They couldn't handle me expressing my own truth. They couldn't handle me being myself, and they left. But the cool thing is that those people left, but you attract people then into your life that celebrate you for who you are, celebrate you for your authenticity, celebrate you for being honest and in touch with yourself.
I've got an image of you as a market stall owner,
Yeah.
kind of literally trading away aspects of yourself.
It is.
You know,
that's what it's like.
That's too much of me, so I'll sell that away, and then what's left will fit into this mold.
We're always constantly becoming someone else in order to keep these relationships intact, because we fear on a subconscious level that if we are our authentic selves, then we're going to lose these attachments, these relationships.
Reflection and through coaching of myself, I've reflected on my relationship with my parents, my dad, and so I had a major role model leave my life. And I think what it did, actually, it granted me quite a lot of latitude around the role models that I chose. So I have reflected on the role models in my life, and that to fill that hole, kind of a dad-shaped hole, I was very receptive and aware of people who I admired for one or many reasons. And so I went through, or how it's still going through life, and paying particular attention to particular people. And it might even be someone that I never actually meet, that I actually only witness on the street. I see something that I like, and I kind of absorb that into me and move on. And the silver lining of that cloud of my dad's death was that I had that latitude, and I met or was conscious of maybe many more role models, because I had a thirst for one. But it didn't come from one place. And as you talked about, you know, parents and the lives they lead, and to some degree we have to fit into their lives, maybe I wasn't bound so much by that. So thanks for mentioning that, because on a personal level, that's kind of helped me understand my journey.
It just triggered something in me then. And it was something that Freud said, that I won't go into the whole dialogue, but basically what he says is that we can only see in something in other people, we can only see in other people an aspect of ourselves that we cannot accept, or we refuse to accept. When we get into an interaction with somebody and they trigger us, we get angry or something, their behavior is triggering something inside of us. It's not about them. It's about something, it's an aspect of ourselves that we refuse to accept, that we see in someone else. And that works both ways. So when you talk about, see people in the street, or people that you respect, or people that you admire, or people that you think would be an excellent role model for you, the qualities they possess, you already have, because you wouldn't be able to see those qualities in somebody else unless you already had them.
Okay, I'm with you now, and I totally agree.
Okay.
Right, okay. In coaching, when you're thinking aspirationally, just as you said, if you can imagine something, you can go and do it, because it's come out of you. So we're not putting any ideas into someone's head in the coaching world. We are bringing ideas outside of somebody, so they can look at them and hear them, and then they've created that, and therefore it's within their realm to go and achieve that, do that, be that. Yeah, I firmly believe that.
Yeah, I think in my sense, it's more a case of you can only see something good or bad in someone else, an aspect of yourself That's what triggers us. Very, very interesting stuff. And it's actually quite liberating when you think about it.
Okay.
Because
Really.
when somebody does trigger you, it's an opportunity. If you get angry or sad or frustrated or irritated with somebody, that is an opportunity. That's a golden key to unlock a door. It's like, what is it about this person's behavior that's so upsetting for me? And that takes me, because you love what's the word? Metaphors. You dig metaphors. So if you think about a trigger, what is a trigger on a weapon? It's a very, very small part of the component.
Love it.
I was on nuclear submarines, right? We carried intercontinental ballistic missiles. What is the trigger for an intercontinental ballistic missile? It's a little red button. The trigger is a very small component, right? The most important part, when we get triggered, so somebody sets us off, right? Then you've got the explosive. Well, that's us. We get triggered. We must be much more interested about this. It's always an opportunity to discover something about ourselves. When somebody does something that we don't like, we can say, hang on. What is it about this person's behavior that I don't like? What does it say about me? What do I make it mean about myself? You have to get in order to grow, we have to become curious, and we also have to have the courage and the conviction and the drive and the willingness and open-heartedness to be able to support that transformation. I can smell it within a few minutes if they're looking to me as if I've got all the answers. I don't. I will give them the key in order for them to unlock the door. I don't have a magic wand. I can't shoot them with a magic bullet. They're the ones that have to do the work.
But that's what's the magic bullet, the wand. It falls in line with other aspects of their life, maybe, and then we're both doing something different. We're taking them on a different journey, allowing them to rummage around in a safe way. I think that's something I do. Is I'm sure you do as well.
Fundamental. We
say in the coaching world, we hold the space. It's a very coachy term, but it's like basically protecting the client from themselves. So rather than having aspects of them shut that down, go, no, don't look at that. No, we can look at this. It's okay. And allowing them to be curious and to stay in that space. And also, I think I mentioned that kind of metaphor of the airport, the arrivals in life, the processing through your airport, because we all are airports, and then the departures of things. If that system's kept going and open, then we're allowing more arrivals to happen. When we're not curious, when we don't look at something, for example, addiction or the arrival of anxiety or anything like that, it stays in the airport and just gets in the way. In terms of creating that safe space that we do for our clients, I think one thing I would assume you do, and what I do is I help the client see the back of their head. That's my next metaphor.
Okay. Make the unconscious conscious.
Yeah, that's come and stand where I am, and hear your words and see what I see, and also be free of where you're standing as well. So in my rowing days, there's a coach alongside in the launch, and there I am sculling along or rowing along, and I can't see my form from that particular vantage point, which is one of the reasons why I've got a coach. The coach can give feedback and give me more of a 360-degree view. And I think that is the advantage of what we do for our client. One of the advantages is that we allow them to see themselves from other perspectives and
definitely
hear themselves from those places as well.
You mentioned something really important. It's about what do you call it in TTI coaching? Is it holding space?
Yeah.
Holding space. We call in the work that I do, it's called emotional holding. And the interesting dynamic about that is this: if you cannot form a connection with a client, nothing you say or do is going to help them. So the first thing is you have to create a safe space. And what I mean by that is that only when compassion is present will people allow themselves to see the truth.
Only when compassion is present will people allow themselves to see the truth.
And I've got another metaphor for you that just popped into my head. So, in order for men to grow, and this is the biggest one, I think, is that we have to reconnect with our vulnerability.
Oh, yes. Love that one.
Drill down through all that bullshit that's covering up our vulnerability, okay? And the metaphor I want to use is that if you're going to plant a tree, you cannot expect it to grow if you plant it in concrete. In order for a tree to grow, it must be planted in soft, fertile ground. And it's the same with us, especially with men. It needs to be the tree needs to be soft, planted in soft, fertile, vulnerable ground. And it's the same for men. Men need to be able to access that vulnerability in order to grow. And I think that's one of the hardest, one of the biggest challenges, especially in working with men. And actually, to come back to what you asked me earlier, my sort of spiritual teacher, so to speak, is Dr. Gabor Mate, and he says that we only teach what we need to learn ourselves. And in relation for men, every time I work with a male client, I learn something about myself. They will say something, I'll say, shit, yeah, I do that, or I can relate to that. So it's always this opportunity. It's not just a one-way street whereby I'm giving of myself. You know, the relationship goes both ways.
I totally agree, and maybe our clients aren't aware of that necessarily. There's the sort of impact those things have, and obviously when you're in the process of a session, that's something that lands with you, and we put somewhere because we're self-managing to serve our clients, but it can be really impactful. And so, you know, we're not the finished article ourselves. We're not the done deal.
It's a process, yeah.
It's a because I think anyone who says they are, I would be suspicious of. Yeah. There you go. I was trying to be.
You know, at the end of the day, that's our purpose. People say, well, what's your purpose? My purpose is to become more conscious of who and what I am.
Yeah. In
my evolution to my higher self. So what is your higher self? I have no idea. I don't know if I'll ever get there. But the journey starts from the day we're born to the day we die. It's an ongoing process. We don't suddenly arrive at some point and say, okay, cool, I got it all figured out now.
I love when I interview people, I love to stand somewhere they can't stand and give some feedback. And I like to give some feedback in terms of the LPS, and anyone who does CTI training will know it's a life purpose statement, which is a metaphor of you at your best and the impact you're having when you are at your best. And the structure goes, I am the who. So my life purpose statement is I am the Sherpa bear who allows men to catch their fish. And that, to me, that is me at my very best, and when I feel most connected to what I'm doing and the impact I'm having. So I wanted to have a go at offering one of you today.
Okay.
And it's by no means a perfect process, but it's an ongoing process. So I think in terms of what I've seen of you, to think of a metaphor, I think because of the journeys that you've been on, I think you could command a vessel that's gone on that sort of journey. So you're the commander of the submarine that goes on vulnerable journeys. And the impact you have on people is not as easy for me to say because I haven't spoken to your clients and I haven't worked with you personally. But what do you think about that kind of metaphors? Someone who's, you know, kind of been there, done that, and you have a lot of calmness, like a commander would probably have.
It's very interesting that you should bring up the sea, because, you know, that's my very interesting. There was a psychologist at the rehab that I was in South Africa, And I was always in the water, you know. I spent 10 years on nuclear submarines, totally submerged in the water. I'm extremely comfortable in the water. I'm a technical diver. I explore all the very deep World War I and World War II wrecks around Malta. So I'm very, very comfortable in the sea. And he said, I finally sussed it out about you. And I was like, what have you sussed out? And he said, for you, being in the sea is like being back in the womb. It's like being surrounded in amniotic fluid. But what you were saying about, you know, the command of the submarine in relation to my journey, well, an aspect of our resilience, emotional intelligence training is asking people to describe their journey so far as if a journey on a sailboat. And each part of the sailboat represents a different aspect of resilience. So the founding block of resilience is health, which is broken down into sleep, nutrition, and exercise. If you've got a leaky hull, so what's happening with your hull? Well, my hull was leaking, it's very low in the water, it's tipped over one side because it's out of balance, blah, blah, blah. And then they describe each dynamic. The sails are problem solving. If you've got the wrong sails for the wrong conditions, then you're going to have problems. If you've got the right sails for the right conditions, then it's obviously going to be a much more pleasurable ride. So you need to develop the right sails. The perseverance is represented by the outboard engine. You know, what's happening with your outboard engine? It's blocked. I'm running low on fuel. There's a net entangled in the propeller. I'm not going anywhere. So it's this, I can really relate to a metaphor in regards to the sea. I do strongly believe, if I think on an intellectual level, that, you know, I am a skipper of my boat. You know, and the thing to realize is that I can control every aspect of my boat, but I cannot control the external elements.
That's a really important point to make, when we often try to control everything that lies outside.
Exactly.
We'll be kept busy with that Sisyphean task for the rest of our days. So, okay, I'm going to offer you a quick amendment of my life purpose statement for you, Paul.
Go on.
So you are the comfortably submerged commander who allows others to swim and breathe in their vulnerability.
Nice. I could dig that. Yeah, works for me.
So what I challenge you to do is, I'll send it to you. Is play around with it, and maybe tell it to other people to see if they think not that they decide, but to just practice talking about it. And seeing if it lands with other people, because the more I think I try my own on and talk to the people, I think, yeah, actually, that is a true reflection of me at my best. So I always try and offer that to anyone that I interview for whatever reason we're holding the interview.
Yeah, okay. I'll check it out. Yeah, I'll run it past the wife. She's the she's the strategy dude in this relationship. Yeah.
We could talk, I think, for a long time, Paul.
Sure.
I'm going to bring it to a close shortly.
Okay.
But talking, I think what I wanted this interview to do is to demonstrate two men talking openly about things which do require vulnerability and do show that we are interested in helping men at a deep level. And one message I want to put across to anyone watching is of the power of men talking and just starting that process. Because lots of internalization goes on, and we just keep things in whilst we get busy doing those external things. And quite often I meet men at a point where they may not have gone through anything particularly traumatic, but they've been putting a collection of things inside that, you know, they haven't done anything with them necessarily, but that's starting to rise up and become something they don't really identify with, or they're not sure what it is or even how to affect it. And they're confusing that as something else external when it's actually something internal. So yeah, I want men to watch this, and anyone who knows a man that may belong in the world of where we can help, to know that of the value of talking. And often the hardest point, I think, is starting to talk. And I know that when men start talking, they are brilliant at it.
It starts at a really young age, you know, like my relation to my old man, you know, about my emotions. If you don't shut up, if you don't stop crying, I'll give you something to cry about. Grow up. How old are you? with,
Be a man.
yeah, exactly. And then you've got the media, you know, he died with his boots on, he's riding off or on or into the sunset, you know, get off my land by dawn, or and all that bullshit, you know. And that's not who we are, actually. And really, I think for most men, the biggest fear is for them, if they talk about something, for them appearing as weak. Because we're not allowed to be weak. We're not allowed to be vulnerable. We're not allowed to be emotional. And all of these things that we're not allowed to be in this society will have a cost. And there, at some stage, we are going to have to pay the bill on that, in forms of our relationships, in forms of our emotional states, and psychological dysfunction, depression, anxiety, anger. And the most important for us as men is to learn how to reconnect with who we are at our core, and not this construct, this personality that we've formed in order to get along in this society.
Well, I think that's a really good place to bring our chat to a close. Anyone watching, if you want to talk to either myself or Paul, I'll put our contact details in the description below. I hope you've enjoyed this. I've thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, likewise, Rob.
So many things to go and think about now, and you might have seen me scribbling a few things down, and I've probably got a plethora of metaphors to come back at you with next time, Paul.
Okay, mate.
But thank you very much, and thanks for joining me from all the way over there in Malta, and thank you for everyone for watching.
Yeah, more than welcome, mate. It's been a pleasure. Hope my cats weren't too distracting. They're going absolutely
offering some light relief in the background. Yeah,
they go ballistic. Normally with my clients, I'm in the office, but the missus is taking over that this morning. She's got client stuff happening. So yeah, but thanks, Rob. It was a real pleasure today.